Welcome to ILA Radio, where we tune into all ways of knowing. I'm your host, Laura Alyn, and joining us today is Scott Trumpolt. Welcome, Scott.
Thank you for having me on your program. I really appreciate it, Laura.
Of course. So, do you mind starting off by sharing a little bit about yourself?
Well, for roughly the past 30 years, just to summarize things real quickly, my area of expertise has been employee compensation planning and design services, which is a function within the human resources department. And I worked in the corporate world for about 18 years, both in the United States and also over in Germany. So I have a global expertise. And almost 13 years ago now, I decided to strike out on my own and become an independent consultant where I could focus my full time energies on designing compensation plans that help to drive the employee engagement factor, which, as you know, is so important. When employees are engaged, they're more likely to work towards greater business results for the company. So everything that I do really focuses on how it ties back to employee engagement factors.
Yeah, I definitely think that is so important. And it's so cool because you have Leo in the 11th house. And so the 11th house is about community and like raising that engagement. And Leo is about that joy that employees need to have some level of joy to be engaged. Would you agree?
Oh, absolutely. And our challenge is to take their feedback that we get on employee opinion surveys or other types of information that companies receive, and how do we translate those needs, those wants, into actionable programs that support what they're really looking for in terms of employee engagement. So, how do we make programs that actually help to foster that and to tap into their concerns, and also to then customize it so it becomes linked to the business need of the organization? When that happens, everybody wins.
Yeah, definitely. So, what got you started on this career path?
Well, I had gotten my undergraduate degree in a different subject area, and I worked for a few years in that. And someone in their early 20s, they're not sure what they want to do with the rest of their life or even maybe the next few years. And so I had an opportunity within the company I was working. I was working on a master's degree in human resources management, and they actually placed me into the human resources department, tried me out in different areas, and found that I really had an aptitude for the analytical aspects of compensation. And I was so fortunate because I was mentored by two individuals who really had a wealth of experience. And so for the time that I was there, I picked up so much, and that's something I never forgot. So as I move forward in my career, whether I was as a compensation director managing people or as an individual contributor, I always tried to mentor. And I still do that now as an independent consultant, because a lot of the companies I work for, they may have an internal resource in compensation, but they may be very junior. So I'm able to mentor them as we complete the projects that we work on together. I'm also a certified global remuneration professional through the World at Work. So I'm certified in the body of work that I do. But essentially, it's been about the experience, about 30 years. So in that time, I've able to collect a lot of different experiences and refine what works, what doesn't. I'm actually going to be putting out a book about it, not specifically about what I do in the compensation area, but just a different approach to independent consulting that I think a few people might enjoy.
Could you share more about like what the inspiration of writing a book or like what process, where in the process you are in that writing a book?
Yeah. Well, I finished the book and it's in the process now of getting published on some sites. It'll take probably another month or so. But really, what I wanted to do was, there's so many people in the corporate world or maybe working for a nonprofit, and they're applying their skills in that area, but they can't really get full uh, get to this idea of doing really what they want all of the time, it seems like they have to spend a lot of time on other parts of the job that aren't really devoted to their passion in what they do. And so I'm trying to make the case for encouraging those long-term individuals. Hey, you can rely on your contacts and your own experiences and then refine them as an independent consultant to be more effective and efficient and spend 80, 90% of your time doing the things that you really love doing as part of your job and minimizing the administrative aspects and other things about it which take you away from that passion. So it's a book of encouragement. I do get into the book a little bit about different areas that are important, things that you need to be aware of. There have been other books, I'm sure, that have talked about being an independent consultant. You have to do this and that, but perhaps not from the approach that I'm taking. It's not, again, specifically about what I do, but it's more about the independent consultant lifestyle and things that you need to do to keep your sanity going and to transition, because it's completely a different way of life. And ultimately, at the end of the day, what you're doing is you're selling yourself as your business. And that takes different skill sets and different approaches. So those are the kind of things that I cover in the book. And I just thought after a certain number of years and being able to retain and grow my business and to the point where it had been successful, that, hey, there might be some things that I'd like to share that might help others.
Hmm. So with independent consulting, is it a one-on-one relationship, or do you speak in front of crowds, groups, or how does it work?
Usually, what happens is I work, initially, it's usually working with one person to get into the company to do a project. And then from there, it's usually a project team. And that is just a group setting. And then ultimately, when the project is ready for the final stamp of approval, I mean, the project's already been budgeted for, but you still have to convince them that the solution that you've come up is completely right for them. And by that point, you've got the support of the project team. So that's when you do some presentations for a larger group, say the executive leadership team, but it's usually restricted in size to 10, 12 people. Any presentations that I do might be outside of my direct consulting function, where I might give a talk on my experience at a meeting of other compensation professionals, things of that nature. But usually it's small groups of people that you work with, at least in my line of work.
Hmm. So the reason I ask is because you have a stellium, which means there's a large collection of energy in the seventh house, which is the house of one-on-ones, and it's in Aries. And so at first I thought that it could be like I asked a one-on-one with a relationship, a business relationship, but Aries is the sign of the self. So it's that you went into business with yourself by betting on yourself, and Aries is the sign of risk taking and leadership and like I don't want to say impulsiveness because I'm sure that there was thought behind it, but to like jump in full heartedly. And you mentioned that you did have this career shift. So could you walk us through why, like, or how you built the confidence to bet on yourself and start this this line of work?
Yes, incidentally, I am an Aries. I was born in April,
Mm-hmm.
so I am an Aries. So good deduction on your part there, Laura. Um, I know you had other pieces to that, but essentially it was running its course. I could have stayed in the corporate world, but what happened is I was over in Germany and I was working in, you might say, the top area, a center of excellence, as they called it within the corporation, to identify theoretically different new concepts that could be utilized in my area of expertise company wide. But it was a very, very large company, and the chances of getting those type of projects to the point of even starting them was very difficult because there were so many different divisions, so many different countries involved, and so many decision makers that I found that I was spending too much of my time in meetings and not enough time actually doing what I love, which was to design, to create solutions, to see the impact of those solutions. So after some time in that role, I realized I kind of peaked at where I could derive satisfaction within myself. I was getting older, and it was just a triggering point, if you will, for deciding that it was time to go back home and start my own business, because by that point I had had about 18 years of progressive experience in the corporate world in that specific function. And I had a lot of contacts, a lot of people who knew my work, and I felt as though, well, this is not as big a risk as you may think, because even then, 12, 13 years ago, there was the opportunity with, working remotely and doing things from home already starting to bloom. So the timing was right in that sense. But I felt the bottom line was that if I can't make it now on my own, after all this experience and all these contacts, then I'm not as well prepared as I think. So it may sound rash on the outset, but while it was triggered rather suddenly, I think in the back of my mind, I had been ready to consider this. I had worked years earlier with an independent consultant when I was on the inside working in corporate, and I saw a little bit about how their lifestyle operated. Things always change, but it gave me that initial idea. And I write a little bit about that in the book in terms of what was the triggering point, because for everybody, there's a different triggering point if they decide to make that decision, and you need that, because it is a little scary to go out on your own, to not have a support system. No matter what you may think in your corporate job, there's a lot of things taken care of in the sense that, the company's paying a portion of your benefits. You're going to have to cover that on your own. There's different aspects. You're really on your own in that sense. But the flip side of that is this feeling of self-actualization to a certain degree, not 100%, because we keep working towards that as we get older and older and trying to attain the perfect version of ourselves, imperfect as it is. It's trying to get to the perfect version of ourselves. And for me, the scariness initially of going out on your own and being responsible for trying to figure out where your next paycheck is coming from all the time and all the other aspects that the corporate life provides some stability to, was ultimately outweighed by the chance that, hey, I get an opportunity to demonstrate my passion every day in what I do. And so it's no longer work. It's more of a hobby that pays the bills. So
Hmm.
So on the surface, sounds kind of rash, but when you dig into the details, it was the right move to make. And 13 years later, I'm still going. So I think I made the right decision.
Yeah, for sure. So the way that I'm looking at the chart, we went over the fire signs, and now we're gonna go into the earth signs.
Mhm.
And so with the earth signs, it's like to have this kind of stability. So like you're saying, like it wasn't as scary because you already had the structure in place. So
Mhm.
could you talk about like the was the structure the need to create and design like how you were saying, or was it that you already had these connections and you already knew how to work in this space that gave you the structure to make the leap?
Well, I had the connections of people, but I didn't necessarily know if they would hire me as an independent. That was the great unknown. But the one of the
Mm.
things that I did understand was that my connections also know people. And there are a lot of companies that are on the smaller side. They don't have a fully developed human resources staff or other business staffs, and they may rely just on people to keep the lights on, which is fine. But there comes a time where they need someone that has the expertise that they can't afford to bring in house on a full time job, but they can bring someone from the outside, which is perfect. No long term commitment with my services. I don't do contracts. I'm only there as long as I'm adding value. And that's very important to me. I believe in what I do, and people will keep me. I've had some clients for multiple years, not full time, of course, but for a great period of time. And sometimes they leave and sometimes they come back in. So I didn't have the structure and sense of of knowing that. But again, it's people who know people. And then when you start to work for a client that was referred, you were referred to them by one of your contacts, and then you do a good job for them, they remember you and they refer you to others. And it becomes this cycle that you have nothing to do with it yourself. It just kind of self-replicating, and it feeds off of itself. So that becomes the structure. Now, for the past year or so, I felt, even though my business is still strong, I felt like I was getting a little flat, a little bit set in my ways after all this time. And so I wanted to re energize my structure, so to speak, by starting
Mm,
to do podcasts and to redesign my website to make it more effective for today's viewers out there and potential clients. So I've been focusing a lot on marketing, which for the first 12 years or so, I didn't really do any marketing. It was just word of mouth, and that kept me going quite nicely. It's just I was starting to feel that, not that my solutions were, but I was starting to feel a little bit stale. And I realized that I needed to do some new things to stimulate me. And within a month or two of starting to do podcasts and finishing my book and putting out a new website, even if it doesn't bring me anything more financially, it reinvigorated me to get new clients, which I did, and to sometimes revisit prior relationships and reignite those as well. So they were kind of done alongside of each other. So you do need to not fully reinvent yourself, but you need to kind of look at those times. You need to, very important when you're independent consultant, is trusting your instincts. Very, very important. And that may tie into, astrologically, but I think that's very important. That's the structure to me, is creating this self-replicating cycle and looking at that cycle, and where it seems to be getting a little bit flat is to figure out ways to invigorate that. And you build confidence in yourself as an independent consultant. If you continually deliver the goods, you get paid to do that. I mean, I always say that that's the best reward you can get for a job well done, is to be able to do some more of it. And if that keeps happening, that's going to kind of dictate your path forward.
mm-hmm. So you mentioned instincts, but with your Saturn, it's in a Pisces, and Pisces is with intuition. So, is it possible to conflate these, or how do you differentiate between trusting your intuition versus trusting your instinct, or is there a difference?
I personally kind of view them the same, in this in the same boat. Uh, the only thing is that you really have to be you have to guard after a certain number of years. It's only natural that you start to think that your instincts or your intuition is always right, and sometimes you need to balance that. You need to be a That's the other thing about being an independent consultant, is you really need to be a really good listener, and to understand that anything you do is going to have to be customized for each audience. And you shouldn't get too complacent with thinking, well, this is the way it needs to be done, because that's how you differentiate yourself. There are big organizations that do what I do. They charge a lot more because they have a much larger overhead. But the thing is that they have a very much a set way of doing things, off the shelf type of solution, and they force fit it into organizations, where I have the flexibility, the power of one person to really customize it. And to tie back to what you were originally talking about, you do need to guard against, while instinct and intuition is really important, you need to realize that you need to listen very carefully to what potential clients really think that they want. They may not be able to fully articulate it, and that's what you're to help turn that into a reality. But sometimes it's best to check your instincts at the door a little bit and focus just on being a really active listener.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a really interesting dynamic because the instinctual listening, I mean, the instinctual like going for it is Scorpio, whereas listening and getting slow and using your like emotional space to really understand a client is with Taurus, and you have it in the 8th house, and this is also where you have Mercury, which is communication. So you are able to find these words that are kind of in the dark in your client's head and bring them out. So is it something that's natural for you to do, or is this a skill that you had to learn?
Oh no, I had to develop it. Uh, I I had to absolutely develop it, and that's one of the beauty of working for a number of years in the corporate environment. I got exposed to different people, and you learn through trial and error. I learned when I went over to Europe that what was the approach there uh, was different a little bit, how you connect with people there than it would be in the United States. I kind of knew this going in, but it's that's the key thing, is that you're working out the bugs. You spend, say, 20 years in the corporate world and you learn so much, and you just need to apply it in a different way. So you're really taking everything you've learned, and again, to your question, to your point, it's certainly not something you're born with, or you really need to develop it, and you get opportunities, but you need opportunities. You can read all the books you want, and I love to read a good book and to educate myself about something, but you need those experiences to really develop those skills. And for some people, everybody learns at different speeds. Some people are more naturally inclined. um, I work very well on one. I mean, if you want to get into personalities, I'm definitely an introvert as opposed to an extrovert. I like working with people in small groups and one on one. That's where I function best. Uh, but I had to learn how to communicate to larger groups, which was not natural for me. But I found that if you have a passion for what you do, your message comes through, and you just need to polish and practice and work on your weaknesses, as well as fostering your strengths.
Hmm. So the other way that we could, I said earlier that it was through the earth signs, but now that we're talking more, I think it's actually like the structure is by having this relationship with yourself and finding the relationship on the outside too, like with these different people and having these connections. Um, so yeah, I guess I'm just really trying to understand like how we could build this like safety net when jumping out and doing something on our own. Does that make sense?
Um, yeah, how to build a safety net. That's uh,
Or
that's
is
the
it not
biggest
possible?
that's the biggest challenge of all, because to but I would say this: you have to not look at it. If you make this leap into independent consultant, don't look at it, obviously, and a lot of people don't. One of the things that they're most scared about is the fact that they don't know where the next paycheck is coming from. They're going to have to hustle for these clients and things like that. But I think they forget, here's the safety net. It may not be something tangible, but here is the safety net for the independent consultant, and it can be a little bit scary, but you are in charge of your destiny. And you have, I would much rather now, having worked in the corporate world for a number of years and now as an independent for a number of years, I can say to you right now, while it may not be for everybody, I feel much more secure in terms of a safety net, in the fact that I have 7 or 8 clients at a time. I have revenue streams coming in from these different clients. Whereas if I'm working in corporate, at any moment, totally out of my control, management may decide. I was never part of a reduction in force. I was very fortunate. I had to work as part of doing a reduction in force, but I was never affected by one personally. But at any time, you can be let go, and you've put all your eggs in one basket. Sure, you can go out and get another job, but that can be a much more jarring experience for individuals. So I feel more secure knowing that, hey, if I lose a client or two, which is inevitable, I can replace them with other clients. I still have 4 or 5 or 6 clients that I can rely on. I'm in pretty good shape no matter what happens. I had some challenges during COVID, like everybody else did with their business, but I made it through that. And it's been that way for 13 years. I've actually, except for maybe 1 or 2 of those years, I made more as an independent than I made in the top jobs that I made in corporate. And I was paid well in corporate. But I think the security blanket or the safety net is scary at the same time. You don't think of scary and safety together. But to me, it's that feeling that, hey, I'm in charge of my own destiny. I really am. And whereas when I'm working for someone else, I can be let go and not have something else lined up. It can be really jarring. So I feel much more comfortable. That's the safety. That's the safety net to me. It's
Mhm.
up to me.
Yeah,
So
very well
you
said.
you can view it. It depends on the individual. You can view it 2 ways. You can view that as too scary to contemplate, and not everybody will do it. But I just know there's so many talented people out there, more talented than I am, that could go out on their own. It's the mental block that may be stopping them, the insecurity, um, rather than their actual talent that they have. And so I would like to encourage other people, because there's no better feeling than doing your own thing and spending 90% of your time. Sure, I have to do some administrative tasks like everybody else that I'm not crazy about, or following up on accounts and things like that. But essentially, I get to do what I want to do every day, and isn't that shouldn't that be one of the goals in life?
Definitely. Yeah, very well said. I think that it's important to get that across that you can be let go at any moment. So like you hear you're betting on yourself and that could be scary, but it's also what is invigorating and what makes us feel alive too, to be able to do what we want to do and add to society with our gifts.
Yeah, because we all have talents. It's a matter of discovering them, and when
Hmm.
you discover them at whatever age, try and develop them to their fullest, because that's going to be your best bet towards financial security, as well as, from what I've experienced, internal happiness. Um, I've tried, early on in my career, I didn't know what I wanted to do, and that was part of the reason why I wasn't really finding my niche and what I was good at. And again, I can't emphasize this enough. There are so many talented people out there that if they looked at it in a different way, they could even be happier, I think, on their own than they are currently. But if they are very happy and they like working in that environment, nothing wrong with that. I worked in large scale environments for a number of years, and there was many good points to it. So this is not meant to be a knock on different environments and like the independent consultant is the only way to go. I'm not trying to say that. It's just, I think for a lot of people, it would be better for them personally as well as professionally, because the person and the profession get more intertwined. Some people like to keep that very separate. I like to combine the two.
Hmm. Thank you. That was my next question. So, your Libra rising suggests that you are very balanced within yourself. And so, my question was like, how do you do that? How do you find this balance between work and your life? But you're saying that you combine them, so boundaries don't get meshed up. Like, how do you? How's like your day to day? I guess.
Well, I think that from a day to day perspective, the important thing is, and this goes back to a different kind of safety net, which is your emotional well being. I think it's very important, because as the first couple of years, one thing I had difficulty was I was very much used to routine, getting up, getting dressed, getting in my car, going to the office, and then doing about my day. And when I first started, you have to be very self motivated, because you're managing yourself. But I think you really need to build some structure around this new life and make it part of your your daily routine. I think routine is important to understand. So one of the things that I do is I do a lot of walking of steps every day to keep my weight down, because being a consultant, I can get very, very sedentary. Working in front of a computer, even more than in the corporate office, where you have to go to different offices and different departments, and you're walking around. You don't do that as much at home, so it became very much of my routine that I was, making sure I got 14, 15,000 steps a day. And to be honest with you, since I started that 7 or 8 years ago, according to my blood test, at least, I'm in better health now than I was 20 years ago. I just am.
Wow.
So that's a kind of routine. And beyond that, you need to have a few interests. Um, that keep you going. I'm very much into animals, whether they're my own indoor animals or outside animals, feeding them every day. That's the first thing I do in the morning, because it gives me a sense of, hey, I'm producing, I'm accomplishing, I'm helping these animals outside out. The squirrels and the birds around the house. I it's just it's those kind of things. It's important to have a routine and then fit your work schedule around it. Those sound like very boring items. Walking around, feeding the birds and things like that. But
Yeah, I
it's
think that's
part of
great.
that routine. It's part of that routine of normalcy that is built around your day-to-day work. And the reason why I say it becomes a hobby is because, again, I'm basically selling myself along with my services, but the two are much more intertwined. That's the key point here, is that the personal and professional life get much more intertwined when you're an independent consultant. Not that, and everybody's different. Some people, I know other independent consultants, and they have a whole social life and things uh, going on outside, and hobbies and everything. And I do a little bit of that, but it's mainly about the fact that I love what I do. So I spend a lot of time at it, but I need to have the outside routine around it to make it seem normal.
Hmm. So some people say that like money is the root of all evil, or like money's so bad that how could you sell yourself?
Mhm.
So what would you say to that?
Well, I'm selling a service. I'm just doing it through through myself. I, and that's the difference. I have a service to provide that is considered to be of some value to others. So that would be how I would put it in that context. It's We all have value, okay? We all have value. So that is my way of demonstrating value. And because money is required to sustain us, then that is part of the equation. But one of the things that I do, which I am very proud of, is the fact that uh, I make sure in my business model that I can provide the lowest possible cost to my clients, because I have such low overhead that I don't have to pay out for what I have. Some business expenses related to my profession that I have to pay. So I'm not saying that I'm free and clear, but one of the advantages is I can make sure that these kind of solutions that used to be reserved for companies with heavy pockets can afford to have these kind of solutions as they're building their organization in the hopes of becoming bigger someday. But they can have the tools now in my area that help support that mission. So again, to recap, uh, I don't believe that money can be a wonderful thing if you're being compensated and you're adding honest, ethical value. I see no contradiction in that.
Yeah, it's like for your talent, like you're getting paid for these skills. So it's not like they're taking a piece of your soul away by
No,
giving you money. It's like you're getting rewarded for sharing your gifts with the world.
yeah, I mean, I've actually had some people that know me really well from the business world saying, things like, "Boy, you really earn every dollar." They're almost intimating that, I'm kind of giving it away, but that's not the first thing that runs through my mind. I mean, the first thing that runs through my mind, and it's just the way I am, is the type of client it is. Is it a new industry that I haven't provided services to before? Okay, that's going to strengthen my business model. Is it a name company? Of course, I work with a lot of companies that aren't household names, but when I get one that's a household name, that's a nice feeling because people always ask you, well, who have you worked for or whatever, and you obviously have to keep things confidential. But in a general sense, you can mention, and it's fun because they don't say, "I never heard of them" or whatever. So it's those kind of things that pique my interest. What the project will be doing, and who I'll be doing it for, and does it open up some new markets for me? Because even though what I do is applicable to any kind of business. It just needs to be modified. There's always potential clients who'll say, well, you haven't worked in my industry. And I can talk to them blue in the face how that doesn't matter, that I have the tools necessary to convert to their type of industry. So it's nice when you can say, yes, I have worked in the aviation industry, and I have worked in the logistics and supply, and I have worked in retail and healthcare. So expanding the map, so to speak. And of course, I've been able to travel over the years. I mean, it was I went over to China to deliver a project. So this is great when you get to travel, and I had already seen the world through different ways, both personally and professionally. But to get that opportunity to go overseas and to implement a project in a completely different culture, that's stimulating. That's exciting. So the money
Mhm.
isn't the first thing. The money is more a means to an end. We all have to eat. We all have to have housing and shelter. And until somebody comes up with a better system, we're kind of stuck with that.
Mhm. Well, no, I think that it's important that we get paid by using our gifts. I think the problem comes is when we're being forced to do things that we don't want to do that isn't in our skill set, and
Right.
that's like when it gets like bogged down, and then we have all these like bureaucratic things that go on.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, sure. And you have to have a conscience. You have to just not just a social conscience or whatever, but a conscience within yourself to say, if I don't like what I'm doing right now, how can I change that within myself? It has to come from within. So we
mhm.
shouldn't rail too much at others for asking us to do certain things. They're just trying to fulfill a business need. We have to look at ourselves and say, how can we change this dynamic for ourselves? Because ultimately, we are responsible. That's just how I look at it.
Oh yeah, I love that. So going back to what we were talking about with with waking up early and feeding the birds and the squirrels and taking
Yeah,
walks, like this is all very nature based. So would you say that you are a nature enthusiast?
it's. I don't go hiking. I used to in my earlier years. I'm afraid a lot of my hobbies have kind of been pushed to the side. I wouldn't really call me a nature person. I'm not really in communication with nature. It's just I love where I live. I live in Florida. From the first time I visited this state, I just fell in love with it. I mean, everybody's different. They like certain things. Some people may think of Florida and be, "Oh my gosh, I don't like it," and things like that. I just love this state, and I've lived here. My wife and I have lived here for decades now, and it's home. And so from that perspective, it's important to me. But I wouldn't consider myself really into nature as much as I used to be. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, I think it's like having that connection to the land. We talked about intuition and instinct a little earlier, but do you feel like something was pulling you to Florida?
Well, it was when I first married my wife. We had both briefly after high school. Well, her more so had lived in Florida, but we were both back in where we were originally from, which was Massachusetts. And we just decided that we wanted to make a clean break and move down there because we had family members down there, or she did. And I actually did as well. But really, that happened to me when I made my first trip on an airplane as a little boy down to Florida to visit. And when that plane touched down on the runway and I saw those palm trees, which is something I'd never seen in New England, where I was brought up, of course, that just blew me away. I just thought it was a magical place, and that never changed for me. So when we had the option to move down here, we already kind of knew what we were getting into, and it was just right for us. It was like, and it has been. And so and it's interesting too, because your bodies over time acclimate to where you live. And when I go up to New England, I actually start to not feel physically as good. There's different type of allergies in the air, different kind of things. And your body becomes naturally used to the humidity down here and the different aspects of life down here, and your body transforms and it makes you part of the place that you live in. It really does.
Wow, how cool that like your body's like telling you that like you belong in Florida.
Yeah. I just find it interesting that at first you like some place, and then after many, many years, it becomes biologically the best place for you to be.
Hmm. Yeah, it's like biologically ingrained in you over time.
Yeah.
So, going back to the beginning, I had so many questions throughout, so now I'm asking them. Now, so you mentioned that you got your degree in a different subject than you're working in now. But so do you wish that you got a degree, your bachelor's in what you're working now, or what was
No,
that switch like?
no, it was just very early on. I got my undergrad in public administration, and I worked for a few years for a town and local government. Just And it was interesting for me to see how a town operates and governs on a local basis. It wasn't a political job; it was a governmental administrative job, which sometimes gets confused. But I just found it rather limiting. And again, at that point, I just didn't know what I want. So no, I supplemented my education by getting a master's degree in human resources and my certification eventually. I didn't even get my certification until I became an independent consultant years later. But it's really been about the experience. No, I mean, education is good for its own ends. You learn different things, and it stimulates you to learn more, uh, to go into different areas. I mean, that's what growth is all about. So all education is good. It's just some you can more easily apply to what you do than others.
Hmm.
Uh, so, which a lot of people find out when they get a degree in something that they really enjoy, but they don't seem to be able to make a connection to the professional world with that, and then they need to go back to school. That wasn't the case with me. I always used my education in one way or the other between the two different degrees, but it's mainly been about the experience.
Hmm. So a lot of people say that the education system is ruined and that we can't learn this way, things like that. So do you have any ideas on how to better education?
It's been a while since I've been in the classroom. It's hard for me to say, but I think like a lot of best, you can look for best practices in other parts of the world. Um, I remember when I was growing up. I'm dating myself here, but they actually built a new school, and I realize now that it was part of a new project. It was the idea of having all these no walls. It was all an open classroom. It was like an experiment, and I went for grades 1 through 3 to this public school that had had no walls and everything, and it was just a different approach to learning. And so I don't know if they're talking to all of the people about the educational system and what works and what doesn't. I mean, we're still producing some folks that do utilize their education and found it to be a benefit. I am still proud of degrees that I earned, because when I was in high school, I didn't think I would get them. And school is not about education and college and all of this thing. I've met incredibly smart people that were not college graduates, and I've met some people that were college graduates that maybe weren't the brightest in my estimation. But those kind of things, those colleges, education teaches other things like dedication, being uh, being able to be productive, to meet a schedule, to meet a deadline, to have, like I say, persistence over a 4 year period to reach that. So I think school teaches that as well. And so those things shouldn't be left behind if they're going to make some changes. I'm sorry I don't have any further great ideas on the educational system, but
No, I
I think
think that
I think it's more than just knowledge. It's some skills that you learn that people may not necessarily think you're picking up. But that's what, a lot of people say. Well, why does it matter? They hired someone that's got a liberal arts degree. This isn't that kind of a job and things like that. But it shows a broadness to embrace different concepts. Someone who can retain what they've learned and express it in a certain way. It's about stick to itiveness. So it's those other skills that you learn.
mhm. But did you like having that classroom setting where it was all out in the open, or like what was that experience like?
Well, I was so young at the time that, and it was just like some kind of, this is very, very late 60s, early 70 type of thing. So I found it to be very enjoyable at the time. It was more of communal learning, not so much uh, in terms of, we still, obviously would have a teacher and we would be learning how to read and learning how to write and all of that, but the environment was a little different. But I have no idea nowadays if they have that, because that school actually no longer exists. It's been turned into a nursing home. So they've gone from educating the very young to taking care of the very old within that same facility.
Hmm. Well, okay. So now to wrap up, um, the show we also talk about like being a polymath and having these different ways of learning coming through. So talked about a few. We talked about experiential learning, based like on trial and error. We talked about emotional learning and really getting and understanding other people. Um, Even relational learning and how to communicate and understand other people. Are there any other ways that you would say that you know what you know?
Um, I think what I know. I mean, to me, it was about mentoring. That was the biggest one.
Hmm.
Mentoring was the big one for me. That was able to crystallize the idea of academic thought into practical application. So that had the biggest impact on me, and I never forgot that. And I think my certification years later in what I do was very important to me personally, because it validated that the things that the concepts and the terms that I've been using for years, I could actually take exams, because it was a whole set of exams on different areas of what I do, whether it was quantitative analysis or other areas, and pass the exams with a certain grade, 90% or better. Well, I think it was 85% or better. And so it was gratifying to me that what I was practicing still linked back to education. So it's really a balance of those two, with education and practical application, and then with the mentoring aspect, which is so, so important, because that impacts people one on one directly. people learn different ways, but I can't think of mentoring being a bad way of learning. You just
Yeah.
approach it differently with different people. And I continue to be a big believer in mentoring.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. Thank you so much for adding that. But yeah, thank you so much for being here, Scott. And where can people find you?
Two places that would be really good would be LinkedIn. Um, LinkedIn, I have a profile out there, and you can see some of the projects that I've worked on in compensation, give you a better idea of what I do, my background, some podcasts and things like that. And also my website, hrcompensationconsulting.com, www.hrcompensationconsulting.com. That's a good place to get the perspective on what I do. And maybe there's some folks who listen to this who may know of those who might be able to utilize my services because I'm always looking for new clients.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Laura, for having me on. I think this is a really good program to look at things from a different perspective, as you've outlined.
Definitely.
And that's it for this episode of ILA Radio. Thank you for listening and for tuning in to the many ways we come to know ourselves and the world. If something in this conversation sparked insight or reminded you of your own path, I invite you to keep exploring it, journal about it, talk to a friend, read a book, follow some social media accounts, or just notice what the universe is whispering next. I'd also love to hear what came up for you. Share your thoughts in the comments, tag me on social media, or send a message. Your story might spark someone else's learning too. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to subscribe, leave a review, or share it with someone who's questioning what learning could be. And remember, you don't have to choose between your intellect and your intuition. You were born to use both. And actually, there's 14 other ones that you were also born to use. And that actually goes for a lot of things. You don't have to choose one or the other. There's always a bunch of different options. So until next time, I'm Laura Alyn, and this is ILA Radio, where we tune into all ways of knowing. Thanks so much for being here. See you next week. Bye.